Week 2 NFL game previews with the FTN Schatz and Tanier NFL podcast. I am Aaron Schatz from FTN Fantasy, the DVOA guy. He is Mike Tanier. You can check out his Substack, The Two Deep Zone, at miketanier.substack.com. We are here to preview Week 2 in the NFL. And before we get to the games that we were going to cover, we've just been arguing about one of my picks for this week. For folks who don't know, if you're a betting subscriber at FTN, my picks appear in the bet tracker, and there's an article each week. I'm no longer going to publicly pick every game because that's annoying to be like, the advantage on this game is 0.2 of a point. Now judge me on this. But I do give my top picks, and one of them this week is I like the Panthers plus 6.5 at home against the Chargers. I think the Chargers are really a rebuilding team that's going to grind out wins, and I think the Panthers are maybe a little underrated because last week's game was so bad. And so I like Panthers plus 6.5, and Mike does not.
I think they're as bad as what we saw. I think that what they did, and we're going to talk about the Saints later, was an indication of how far they are below sort of a middleweight caliber team. And we're going to see them against a sub-middleweight. I don't know what's below middleweight, bantamweight team in the Chargers. But I cannot advocate even you got to give me 10 points. You got to give me double digits to take the Panthers at this point in the season. I like some of your other picks. I look at it. Hold on. What's the one I saw?
I like the Rams money line. I like the 49ers -6. I like the over on the Steelers.
Yes. I like that. I like the over on the Steelers. I like the 49ers. What was it? 4.5, 5.5 against the
6. 49ers -6 against the Vikings.
I like that one. But yeah, those are some big games. I think people can avoid the Chargers Panthers safely and play some of these other ones.
Don't forget, if you're watching us live, we're on at 11 o'clock Eastern every Monday and Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern live. You can ask questions. And don't forget our sponsor, which is Underdog Fantasy. NFL season is back, and there's no better place to celebrate than by using Underdog Fantasy. It is the easiest place to play fantasy sports and the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. Underdog offers a new customer FTN special with up to $1,000 on your first time deposit. The Underdog app is easy to use, and weekly contests such as the onside kick, the double doink, and the 2-minute drill are all back. Head over to Underdog for a deposit match up to $1,000 when you sign up with code FTN. NFL season is here, and let's celebrate with Underdog Fantasy. Red Matt points out that the last time the Niners won in Minnesota, their receivers were Jerry Rice and John Taylor.
That's impressive. I don't know how often they get to Minnesota. You know, there was a lot of lean times in between, and I think these teams play in Minnesota every 6 years, something like that. So,
well, I mean, they play more often because they're in the same conference. So there's years where they finish in the same place and whatever. And I guess it's just randomly that they haven't played in Minnesota very much.
I think we have some Vikings copium being ingested right now.
Let's talk about the games we are going to preview. That was not one of them. The games that we have on tap are tonight's game between the Bills and the Dolphins, and then we're going to cover Saints, Cowboys, Browns, Jaguars, Bengals, Chiefs, and Bears-Texans. So let's start with the Buffalo Bills at the Miami Dolphins with some injuries.
Yes.
Because Raheem Mostert is out. Devon Achane, they think, is going to go. Yes. Teron Johnson is out for the Bills, who's their nickel corner, although that's in because how much does Miami use Braxton Like, are they going to use Braxton Berrios to pick on Teron Johnson's replacement? It doesn't seem like that's a possibility.
That seems like a win. Throw more balls to Braxton Berrios rather than trying to get the ball downfield to Tyreek and Waddle. Sounds like a good strategy on the Bills side of things. But yeah, I think Achane is going to be working out before the game, and that's how they're going to make the decision on that. So that's very 50-50.
Yeah, and I saw something this morning where someone posted, the Dolphins have the speed of Achane, and they have Hill and Waddle, and they have this and that, and the Bills have Josh Allen.
Yeah, that's a little over.
It's a little bit of an overstatement, but I mean, Josh Allen does. I kept saying to the people last night, I was on a Bills podcast last night, and I kept saying that I really feel these teams are very even.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clear that the market feels these teams are very even because the Dolphins are favored by 2. Right. Means essentially they're favored by home field advantage.
They're favored by the home field advantage. Speaking of home field advantage, I was keeping an eye on the weather down in Miami tonight. It's going to be pretty mild forecast at kickoff. Low 80s, high humidity. The real feel will be 92 degrees. Some possible thunderstorms before kickoff on a grass surface. If it had been extremely hot, I would have thought in terms of the Dolphins. If there's any slickness on that Bermuda grass, I kind of go the other way and say if this is a little bit of a speed neutralizer, then I would look towards the Bills. I don't think it's a big advantage either way, but if this had been like, it's going to be 92 degrees and 104 kickoff, I'd have been worried about the Bills.
Josh Allen, by the way, Andrew points out, is 11-2 against the Dolphins, although I think a couple of those games had Skylar Thompson involved. One thing I want to point out is the Dolphins' defense. They were 30th last year against number 1 wide receivers. It sounds so strange because of Jalen Ramsey, but teams do not always put their best corner on the other team's best receiver, and I don't think Jalen Ramsey is what he used to be. That's why that contract they gave him was that they were paying Jalen Ramsey for what Jalen Ramsey was 3 years ago, not what Jalen Ramsey is going to be 2 years from now. Yeah. And Brian Thomas ran all over him last week, the rookie from Jacksonville. So, no, I don't know who counts as wide receiver 1 for the Bills. I suppose that's Keon Coleman, but perhaps he has a big game here.
Right, and Ramsey's battling a hamstring injury. That's part of it. He tends to be a big matchup corner, so he doesn't necessarily match up against the best guy. It's like if there's a 1A and a 1B, it would usually be the bigger guy along the way. And Ramsey did make.
I think that's Coleman, though. Isn't Coleman the bigger guy?
Coleman's a bigger guy there, so it would be him if it's Shakir. And that was a very Dolphins thing to do to pay him moving forward. Dolphins defense looked kind of good last week, but there were, we'll talk about this with the Jaguars, lots of unforced errors by the Jaguars, which is kind of like saying the Jaguars were the Jaguars. And I think that made things a little easier for the Dolphins defense. I don't think they're going to get as much of that tonight.
The other thing I'll point out is the Dolphins were 31st last year covering tight ends. And in the second game between these two teams, the first game, the Bills tight ends didn't do much, but that was very early in Dalton Kincaid's rookie year. The second game between these two teams, Dalton Kincaid had 84 yards and Dawson Knox had a touchdown.
Interesting. I was looking at the Kincaid anytime touchdown. I think it's a pretty good number there if people are interested in that one.
Yeah, I think I did an Allen first touchdown bet. I mean, Allen's always a good bet for the first touchdown because he scores so many rushing touchdowns. I think these teams are very evenly matched. I mean, I feel like these are the two best teams in the division. I was surprised before the season when at a certain point the market started to favor the Jets to win the division over these two teams. I think these two teams are better, but I think they're about even with each other. Marshall Gershon points out that Kincaid is plus 210 to score a touchdown on DraftKings.
That could be fun. That could be
fun unless they throw the touchdown to Dawson Knox, and then you're like, great, I just got vultured by the second tight end.
which will happen. They run a lot of 12 up there. I'll tell you this, by the way. Someone pointed out earlier Josh Allen's record. Bills have won 10 of the last 12 games. Dolphins since 2022. 10-5 against the spread as home favorites. 10-3 against the spread in division games. And so this is a team that tends to play well in division. Bills kind of trip up a little bit more in division. I see that. I also see, I don't think these teams are as close as that, though. I think the Bills are a better team.
You think the Bills are better. So would you go with the Dolphins are favored by 2. Would you go with Bills plus 2?
I took Bills money line already. Already took it. Yeah. I'm feeling comfortable. One thing we talk about this, a lot of times we say, jump to conclusions week 1. You almost have to throw out week 1. I think you kind of down the road throw week 1 out of DVOA or take it down to like 1%.
Yeah, later on when we get into the weighted DVOA, week 1 gets filtered down. And I also think it's true that teams do treat weeks 1 and 2 almost like the preseason at this point.
A little bit.
So I did some research on this at one point. If you look at 2-week intervals and compare them to final DVOA, the least predictive interval is the last 2 weeks of the season.
Okay.
which makes sense because so many teams are not trying in the last week of the season.
Right.
The second weakest is the first 2 weeks of the season.
Huh. Interesting.
Two random weeks from the middle of the season will tell you more about how good that team is overall than the first 2 weeks.
Fascinating. But I will say this. I love throwing out the first quarter of game one in particular when you see some of the things that were happening in first quarters. Bills were a team that looked very different from quarters 2 through 4 than the first quarter of that game. They looked like the Bills, and that's why that game was closest, because they were tripping over themselves early on, as a couple of teams, the Eagles, were doing as well. So I already took it. I'm taking Bills money line tonight.
One other stat that I picked out from here: Allen struggled against the blitz last year. I put scare quotes there because Allen was slightly above average against the blitz, whereas he was an MVP against 4 pass rushers. But the Dolphins are not a heavy blitz team. They might need to be, because I think Bradley Chubb is still out. But you took the Bills money line. I would stay away from this. The over/under is 49. I would not want to bet on this.
I took the first half over, but that was sort of me taking a bet to take a bet. I'm not like married to it. I like having something in the first half of these games.
And Tyler Sperry says, should I play A-Chain? The answer is you better be online at 7 p.m. tonight. Correct. When the inactives are announced. If you have A-Chain on your fantasy team, or if you have a Jeff Wilson, like I do, I picked up Jeff Wilson in a league where I have McCaffrey. You want to be online tonight at 7 to find out who the running back's going to be.
Yeah, Rap Sheet says they're going to work out like the pregame warmups. That's when they're going to make the decision. So be ready.
Michael Allen Brewer asks, should the NFL just deprecate full preseason games and move to a 20-game regular season if teams are not going to play start? No, that's too many injuries. Too many injuries.
God, 20 games?
We're going to 2-18 very soon. We're going to 2-18 very soon, and then I got to think that's the limit.
I hope that's the limit. That's probably the limit for like what we will be dealing with when we're sitting here talking about it, not like in an old folks' home somewhere. But and 18 again is a war with the union. The union is putting together its package for when it concedes on 18, and that'll be next collective bargaining, I guess, 2021, and then it's probably going to be another 10 years before it's talked about.
And Super Glucose asks if by Jeff Wilson I meant Jordan Mason. No, unfortunately, I didn't get Jordan Mason in that league. I got Jeff Wilson, and if A-Chain doesn't play tonight, Jeff Wilson is the starter, and then I play Jeff Wilson in case McCaffrey doesn't play this week.
And I think he's a good play.
Saints at Cowboys. This is the top game of Sunday's 1 p.m. slate. The Saints at the Cowboys. The Cowboys are the better team. Listen, as the driver of the Saints bandwagon, this is the kind of game the Saints should not win. It's on the road against a better team. This is not a good game for the Saints. I will say the Cowboys are weak against passes over the middle. Carr is generally average on passes over the middle, but last week was very good on passes over the middle with 84 DYAR, including the big Raheed Shaheed 59-yard touchdown. That was a pass over the middle.
That was a pass over the middle. I went back and looked at that. We talked about on Monday how J.C. Horn got burnt. I watched him. He is certain he has a deep safety. He does not have a deep safety, but I'm watching his body language. He is certain he's passing that guy off to a safety.
So you're saying this may not have been the greatness of Carr and Shaheed, but rather a blown-up coverage by the Carolina Panthers.
Well, Shaheed is fast as hell, and Carr is an adequate ball player. And the system is better. Clint Kubiak's system is better than what we saw in the past. That's the one takeaway from the Saints playing this scout team last year.
Yes, Sam Schwartz. Schwartzstein from Amazon Prime tweeted something out about offensive coordinators, the second most important person on the team.
Okay.
That the Saints' victory showed how offensive coordinator is like more important than the head coach. Like only the quarterback is more important than the offensive coordinator. I don't know if that's true, but offensive coordinators do make a big difference.
I think the owner of the other team might be the second most important case in that.
Oh, in the case of the Panthers, is that what you're saying?
Panthers. Quick injury update before we go. Marshawn Lattimore is probably out.
Okay, that's not good for the Saints.
Not good for the Saints. But the Saints bandwagon, by the way, is a Mardi Gras float, just to clarify. So
well, that's why it's the most fun bandwagon to be on.
fun bandwagon ask. Guard Lucas Patrick, who knocked out of the game with a toe injury, he's questionable going forward. So
it's not a good bandwagon to be on if you like offensive line play.
No.
Because the Patrick injury, Talise Fuaga, the rookie, is the left tackle. Sure. Trevor Penning, who couldn't make it at left tackle, is now the right tackle. One of those guys is going to get whipped to shreds by Micah Parsons. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think that's a good matchup for the Saints. Now, the opposite is interesting too, because Chase Young actually had a big first game for the Saints. But it seems like every so often Chase Young has a big game and then he disappears again. But the Dallas offensive line is not as good as it used to be because they've got a rookie left tackle and they've got, a guy who came up from undrafted free agent at center. I can't remember the name of the dude.
I can't remember, but yes.
But they have questions on the offensive line too, so I don't know whether you're
going to get a big game out of Young and the defense.
You may get a big game out of both pass rushes here.
Right. And again, everybody on the Saints looked amazing last week, except Chris Olave, the one guy everyone was counting upon in fantasy, who had one catch, and it was like, dude, it's 31-0. We don't need you anymore.
Yeah, but I'm not worried about Chris Olave in the long term.
No.
So, the line here is Cowboys -6.5.
Yeah.
And the total is 45.5.
Don't like either. The Cowboys are just 6.5 is just on the backdoor covery, mistakey kind of game thing that worries me. I think the Cowboys either roll by 21 or it turns into a monkey thing. I was looking at it. I'm playing with teasing it down. If you go down to 3.5, Cowboys by favored by 3.5, it goes to -154. I'm also looking at something where I might take the Cowboys and parlay it with another 1 o'clock favorite, but I haven't really gotten into that yet, like the Ravens.
Tyler Sperry asked the fantasy question: Jaden Reed, Brandon Cooks, or Khalil Shakir? You do not want to be playing Packers wide receivers right now.
No.
I guess I would lean towards Brandon Cooks, especially if New Orleans has injuries in the secondary.
Yeah.
Brandon Cooks is so unexciting to play in fantasy at this point because he's an older player, but he's the kind of player you keep on your bench who will give you consistent stats when you have things like, oh God, now Malik Willis is throwing to Jaden Reed.
Right. That's it. That's the reason to have Cooks, because he'll catch like 1 or 2 deep balls, and maybe that's a touchdown, and maybe you get the, 4 for 50 and a touchdown from Cooks. And it's like, I got to win there.
Browns at Jaguars. That's another 1 p.m. game on Sunday. David Njoku is out for the Browns. Mm-hmm. The other thing I wrote down is a small sample size, but Lawrence was only 3.5 yards per pass against big blitzes last year. And Jim Schwartz, when he blitzes, he likes to big blitz. He likes to send 6.
Okay.
What were you saying about how you watched more of the Jaguars in Miami than I did? What was your feeling about the Jaguars?
They're unbelievably sloppy. And I put a couple of things at the 2-deep zone in my little stat pack today. One is they had 4 drop passes per Sports Info Solutions, 2 from our old pal Evan Ingram, 2 from Christian Kirk. They also had 5 blown blocks from Anton Harrison on the front. There were a lot of penalties. Some of the penalties I wouldn't consider sloppiness penalties, like when you get the roughing the passer from Josh Hines Allen and things like that. That's the residue of aggressiveness. But this was a team that went out there, was in position to win this game and turned it around. And it's something that I see so often from the Jaguars. You're going to get all these little fit and finish errors. It's not going to be optimized. There was another stupid 4th down play. That was another thing they did where they.
Oh yeah, they had a 4th and 1, and they did Etienne on a very slow developing. How horizontal can you possibly go? Run instead of into the line.
Into the line, or anything with some play action, or anything, or reverse action count, anything to hide what they were doing. And they ran right at Ramsey too. And Ramsey is a very big cornerback who can hustle, and it turned into like a fake Marcus Allen play. So I look at those things, and that worries me about the Jaguars, but I don't like the Browns in general. Another thing from the Browns injury report, I probably should have gotten it right before we went online. Right tackle Jack Conklin was back at practice, but limited yesterday. Left tackle Jedrick Wills was supposed to return to practice yesterday, but did not. He might be practicing as we speak. Joel Bitonio on their line is also banged up. He's a limited participant in practice.
the Browns really are, with the offensive line injuries, they really are an all defense team. Like at this point, I believe everybody has given up on Deshaun Watson.
They should have. They should.
And the injuries to the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
But that defense should still be really good. I mean, yeah, the Cowboys, but that was just one game. Like in general, that defense should still be really good. And I can't imagine the Jaguars are going to score a ton of points on them.
Right. Defense missed a bunch of tackles against the Cowboys. They were on the field a lot. I think they were pressing. I think it's a good, still very, very good defense overall. But you might get into these situations where you get the defense making mistakes because they have to do everything. And one note on their defense, Juan Thornhill was placed on the IR, so he's out for a while. They've got other guys, but that's a little loss.
The line is Jaguars -3.
Oh, I hate this.
Yeah, I have it down as a no play.
That's a no play.
I think if you put a gun to my head, I would say Jaguars.
I don't want a gun to my head over the Browns Jaguars. Put a gun to my head over something that matters in this world, people. And stay away from it until I get a better feel for where the Browns defense really is, and if the Jaguars are a sloppy team by the definition, or it was just week one stuff.
Well, here's a game that really matters. The big 4 p.m. game is the Cincinnati Bengals at the Kansas City Chiefs.
Here we go.
Bengals trying to rebound from the upset loss to New England and not start 0-2. Chiefs trying to continue to be the Chiefs.
Chiefs.
But I mean, this is the kind of game. This is when we talked before the season about the Chiefs possibly sleepwalking through the regular season a little bit because their division seemed so easy. Mm-hmm. This is the kind of game I could imagine them losing and paying no price for.
Right. But I also don't see them losing. One of the problems is, of all the jump to conclusions week one teams right now, the Bengals are the jumpest to conclusionists.
Right. Although it was not a heavy year for jumping to conclusions. I think even with the Bengals, people are like, well,
we start out 0-2. It's what we do.
Things happen. Trey Hendrickson, by the way, was awesome against the Patriots. It just couldn't get to Brissett. He kept beating his guy over and over again. He was third in ESPN's pass rush win rate for week one, despite having a lot of double teams. And here's interesting. The Chiefs' defense was only 31st in pass rush win rate for week one, despite having Chris Jones.
I think Chris Jones got some wins. He was looking really good.
Yeah, their edges were not winning.
They were facing a lot of two tight end set, even on third down. So you might have had some chips and things along the way, might have limited the way they were doing things defensively because of what they were up against personnel grouping wise. But for the Bengals, this is an example of when you're playing from behind and when you're in the game and the other team is on schedule a lot because the Patriots were running the ball really well. You're going to get wins from your edge rusher, but the quarterback can just get rid of the ball.
Yeah.
You just get rid of the ball, and they can punt, and that's fine. Or, it's 3rd and 3, maybe they can dump it. That's fine. So you're not optimizing your pass rush when you're the Bengals because you let yourself get into this muck fest.
I would also say the way the Bengals defensive line got pushed around by the Patriots offensive line in the running game does not bode well for Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Joe Thuney. Going against them.
They had a lot of missed tackles as well. Dax Hall had a couple of big whiffs on the edge. Also, injury report. Hold on. Let me pull it up here to make sure I say it right. Logan Wilson did not practice yesterday. That is your best linebacker for Cincinnati. Jermaine Pratt also did not look very good last week from what I was watching because I was trying to figure out where all those
That's your other linebacker for Cincinnati, yes.
Right. He's the bigger guy, and he looked very slow, like he's chasing Ramondre Stevenson, the guy he should neutralize, and he's not getting there in time. So that's a problem. If the Chiefs choose to downshift a little bit, they can do that. And if they don't downshift, they're the Chiefs, and they've got all the speed to bear.
I'll also point out the Bengals were 31st against wide receiver 2 last year. That's Xavier Worthy.
Oops. That's a problem.
Because I'm assuming Hollywood Brown is not playing this week. So it's not, I would think their number 1 is
Rice.
Rashee Rice, and their number 2 is Xavier Worthy, and they better have their safeties back for Xavier Worthy.
And once your safeties are back and you're having trouble stopping the run, even Andy's going to be like, oh, let's try to play a little bit of power football.
You're talking me into Chiefs -6.
Oh, okay.
You're kind of talking me into the matchup favoring the Chiefs. You're kind of talking me into Chiefs -6. The thing that keeps me wary of that is the idea of what if the Chiefs kind of take their foot off the gas in the regular season. And even though this is a game that'll be important for home field in the playoffs, this is the kind of game that you can see the Chiefs losing. And then in January, they have to go to Cincinnati and they win there anyway.
Yeah, I feel like the gas game is going to be, the Raiders or something like that, or some out of conference foe. I'll say this. We all know about the Bengals early season. Since 2020, the Bengals are now 1-8 in weeks 1 and week 2 straight up. They're 2-7 against the spread in weeks 1 and 2. And their games have only gone over 3 times out of 9. So I'm playing with a little bit. What I did was Chiefs -5 to get myself a 1.5. And under the parlay at plus 264. So I think the Chiefs are winning this game. It's a question of whether I'm comfortable at 6.5 if it moves to 7 because of the Higgins injury, et cetera. That's where I get nervous about this.
Do you consider the Bengals versus the Chiefs a rivalry game?
We shouldn't we?
I mean, I think the Chiefs against all the best teams in the AFC are rivalry games because when you get to the playoffs, you're probably going to have to play them. So I feel like the Ravens are a rivalry game and the Bengals are a rivalry game and the Bills are a rivalry. That's the thing about the Chiefs is everybody sees them as rivals. So.
Right. And Bengals, what was it? 2 AFC championship games or 3 or 2 AFC championship games and 1 divisional. They've had a lot of those. I don't know how much to bring to bear in this game when you've got an injured T. Higgins, and now you've got like an injured linebacker, and you've got this Bengals team that has the historic flat start thing that we're seeing more evidence of.
All right, let's get to the night game, which is the Chicago Bears at the Houston Texans, battle of the young quarterbacks.
One of these things is not like the other yet.
Yet.
Give them the gift of yet.
The Bears were the worst defense in the league last year against running backs as receivers, but the Texans do not throw to their running backs very much. They only had 4 catches for 22 yards last week.
Okay, yeah, and I think the Titans were trying to exploit that. They had Pollard in the slot a lot. They were trying to get him the ball. They tried to get the ball to the other young man, Tajay Spears. The problem is the Titans are terrible. Their offensive line is terrible, so they really couldn't accomplish anything. Bears had a very good defensive game. By the way, one of the guys who really stood out in that game, let me make sure I get the name correct here, is DeMarcus Walker, who had like a dozen.
Yes, that's the other edge.
The other edge.
On the other side of Montez Sweat. The Bears were a shocking first in ESPN's pass rush win rate as a team in week 1. After they finished 25th last season. And I'll bet you that connects very with the fact that you just called out DeMarcus Walker for having a good game.
Yeah,
because they needed somebody who was not Montez Sweat, and they got somebody who was not Montez Sweat.
But he's a journeyman. He's got a foot injury. That's why I was bringing him up. I'm not sure if he's going to be playing. He was a journeyman playing the rookie left tackle for the J.C. Latham for the Titans, who was a right tackle in college and is only 21 years of age. That was an ugly matchup. There was an injury at guard for the Titans that caused a matchup problem there. Baby brother at right tackle is still not a particularly good player, and he was going against Sweat and other guys. So it was a mess on that side. I don't know how good the Bears' defensive front really is. It's almost a Saints situation from what we saw.
Our Russian friend, whose name I can never pronounce, says, for the Sunday Night Football Showdown, who should I pick for 1.5 times points MVP? Stroud or the Bears defense and special teams? I don't exactly know how the DST scoring works on, I believe this is a DraftKings question. But I certainly going into the season felt that the Bears defense was a little overrated because they were so dependent on takeaways last year, and that was likely to regress towards the mean. One game doesn't change that opinion, so I would say to take Stroud.
I would take Stroud. You got the block punt touchdown from the Bears special teams last week. Not a repeatable type of thing. Their return man is Velus Jones. He fumbled one of his returns. I think they took him out of that position there. I don't see that as, again, I don't know the scoring, but I think you got the sugar high 2 defense special team touchdown week last week. You're facing a better opponent this time.
I'll say to watch DJ Moore. The Texans were only 28th against number 1 receivers last year, despite the presence of Derek Stingley Jr.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I mean, that's the thing about the Bears is that, I mean, I don't know what Odunze's health situation is He got injured last week, but there's
Day-to-day.
still Keenan Allen and there's DJ Moore and there's Cole Kmet, and so they can spread you on defense. And if Caleb Williams can get the ball, but the problem is Caleb Williams, if he had to hold on to the ball too long, it was like just not happening.
Right.
Which is a total rookie thing.
It's a rookie thing. It was either a quick throw or it was he's trying to go around and do his USC magic, which he was able to do in the preseason, and now he's facing starters, and that's not as easy. Keenan Allen also on the injury report with, I believe, a heel injury. They're minimizing that. If there's one guy of that group that you say we can get him the ball in space on short passes, etc., that's DJ Moore. That's been his life. My quarterback is bad, so I have to catch the short passes and get yacked. So if you're looking at Moore, I would say, yeah, he's going to be focal to that game plan.
The line is Texans minus 6.5.
Mm-hmm.
The total is 45.5.
Mm-hmm.
I have Texans and the over.
I like that. That'll keep me awake on Sunday night. Texans in the over. I like Texans money line or Texans points.
I like Texans in the spread. The thing about the Texans money line is it's like minus 260 or something, so you don't get much back on that.
Right. If you parlay it with the over.
Well, obviously, that if you take the Texans money line, then if they only win by 3 or 2 or something, you get it. But I think I like Texans spread. Texans minus 6.5 and the over 45.5.
I like it. If you're like me and a little wimpy on that, and you just want the money line, and you parlay it with the over, that's plus 167. That ain't bad. So I'll see how I feel on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. Red Matt points out that the Bears added Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and Caleb Williams just so they could continue to win with defense and special teams. There is no Williams. There is no Field. There is only Bears quarterback.
Love it. Love it.
I mean, I still believe in the long run in the fact that rookie quarterbacks tend to be bad. Mm-hmm. They often develop. Caleb Williams was a great prospect.
Yes.
I love the idea. I love the idea of the 2025 Chicago Bears.
Yep. Yeah.
It's going to take time.
Maybe the December Bears will have a little bit of a different feel. Yeah, they made the right decision. Bring in a veteran, bring in a speedster, do all these things. It's not necessarily going to manifest on a Sunday night game in week 2.
All right, that does it for our September 12th show. Thank you to everyone watching. Lots of extra added viewers this week over Twitter, I believe. So thank you, everyone. We're here again, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Mondays and Thursdays. If you're watching on YouTube, or please, like and subscribe to the show, and on your favorite podcast app. Please review the show. Tell people about the show. Let's get us even more people asking fun questions. Don't forget to visit the FTN Stats Hub. Don't forget the FTN DVOA page for content all the time. New stuff from Brian Knowles today. Don't forget our sponsors at Underdog Fantasy. Use code FTN for a deposit match up to $1,000 when you first sign up for Underdog Fantasy. And we will see you guys next Monday. Everybody, enjoy week 2. So long.